Okay, so today I want to talk about something that's probably one of the most asked questions I get, and that is how do I begin talking to loved ones, friends, family about the process of deconstruction that I'm on? You know, most of us in the Christian world end up in quite a bubble. A lot of conventional Christians try and keep you from getting too involved in the world, right? You want to, really surround yourself by these helpful, good, kind, loving people like us, Christians. And so, maybe we have a few friends at work, or maybe we come across a few people at school and stuff like that. But generally speaking, our closest, our nearest and dearest, our family, our friends are going to more often than not be in some form of bubble with us. And that is deeply problematic for when we change our belief, right? We suddenly find ourselves in these bubbles, surrounded by people that assume that we think the same they do. Not only that, on some level, they need us to think the same that we do. And as we go on this journey of deconstructing, of changing our beliefs, no matter how much you've changed your belief, that will come into play on some level, but even some fairly small changes in the grand scheme of things, right? You're maybe not an atheist, or you've not joined the Church of Satan, or become a humanist or secularist, or something that's like quite extreme in comparison to Christianity, maybe more Christian at times. You've not kind of done that. Maybe you just become maybe more progressive in your Christian beliefs. Maybe you've joined a progressive church. Maybe you now are affirming of LGBTQ and you don't believe in eternal conscious torment as a model of hell. Just those small, I say that very lightly because it's a big change to most Christians, those small changes are huge. And so no matter where you fall on this deconstruction spectrum, you're likely going to have the big question in the back of your mind: how the hell am I going to talk to my loved ones? How am I going to tell my mom and my dad, my sister, my cousin? How am I going to tell my friends at church? How am I going to tell my buddies that I hang out with all the time? How am I going to tell my pastor if they ask what's going on? How do I even begin to have these conversations? Because we know on the surface that it's very likely to blow up, right? We've been in these conversations ourselves, maybe as we have been Christians, and we've seen people that we know and love turn their backs on Jesus, as we might have said, or backslide, or reject God, or all these kind of phrases that were our go-to language for this kind of journey. We ourselves had to distance ourselves. We had to keep a distance from such people because they were maybe dangerous, or because we didn't trust their judgments anymore, or maybe just simply because we didn't really have the same things in common anymore. There's a whole host of things going on under the surface, and we'll go into that a bit. But there's a lot happening here just as we start thinking, how am I going to tell some loved ones about this process? As they ask us, what's going on? We've not seen you going to church as much. We've not seen you around at church. We've not seen you at youth group. We've not seen you X, Y, or Z. Or we notice that, you seem a bit less vocal about your faith. We've not noticed you share any GodTube videos. Is GodTube still a thing? We've not seen you share any of those on Facebook anymore. Is Facebook still a thing? These questions happening make us nervous because we know that they're pushing something to a head, right? We're getting closer and closer to having to have some of these conversations, and we know that they're going to be some very problematic conversations, right? It's going to be very hard to have these conversations. And so first of all, before we start, I want to just recap on the last video we did. So we've done a bunch of videos in this series. If this is the first time you're seeing one of these, you might want to go back. We've done what is deconstruction. We've done why do people deconstruct and some of the myths around that, looking at the facts and the data and the figures. We've done why reconstruction is a topic and why it might be quite problematic if you look at it a bit more than at the surface level. And in the last video, we talked about developmental theory, which is a branch of psychology which looks at how people develop over time. And there's hundreds of different developmental models. There's ego development, moral development, needs development, and you'll come across some of these, and other ones will be completely foreign to you. But in a grand scheme, when you look at these ego developments on the whole, they all map to the same kind of trajectory. People grow in their inclusivity, their love, their openness, their vulnerability. They become less black and white, a little bit more open in how they hold things, and a bit uncertain, maybe, in a good way, not in an existential dread way, but just in a thing of like, well, we maybe don't always know the answer, and that's okay. These things happen across the board in almost every developmental theory model. You're going to see these things. And so we talked about some of the main overarching areas within developmental theory. And one of them was conventional stage. And so I encourage you, listen back to the prior video. It'll be really helpful for having these kind of conversations. I'm just going to touch on it briefly and use some of the things we talked about to explain certain things in this video. But one of the things we talked about was that most conventional Christians are at a stage of development psychologically called conventional. And conventional is a stage of development where you look to authority figures to tell you what to believe. You think you're very rational. Every stage thinks it's rational. Every stage thinks it's logical. And it is rational and logical based on its own parameters of what is rational and logical. And so this stage thinks it's rational, but it thinks it's rational because it uses certain bedrock arguments to frame everything. So it might think it's rational, but it requires a Bible to read and interpret, and that is the way you rationally figure out what's right and wrong in this world. Or it maybe thinks it's rational, but you need to lean on an authority figure, maybe a pastor or a leader or a mentor, maybe the Pope, maybe the Queen, maybe God of the universe, whatever it is, right? It filters everything through these authority figures, whether it's through a book or a person or a divine being. And so people at this stage are looking to authority to tell them what to do. Not only that, they accept authority, generally speaking, without much questioning. There might be some questioning here or there, but it's not, generally speaking, possible for people to question too much. This stage also values fitting in hugely. The stage conventional really values being part of the convention, part of the conventional day-to-day group of people. Being in the in crowd is extremely important to this group. And if we think back to being Christian, that's very true, right? It's really important that we're in, that we're saved, that we're Christian, that we're not out, unsaved, non-Christian. These are very clear lines drawn with these languages of in and out and right and wrong. Conventional, above all, is looking to fulfill three core values. It's looking for its safety, certainty, and security. And so when we are in that place of conventional Christianity, we want to feel safe, certain, and secure. I say this because people that deconstruct start to move out of that way of thinking, out of that psychological state, and they move into a new state. And we talked about this as well in great depth. They move into a state called rational, called modern, called individualistic. There's quite a few different names for this. But generally speaking, the change and the shift is a move away from looking to authority figures and accepting what they say as black and white truth, to looking within to oneself and going, I can figure this out. I can explore this. I can read. I can study. I will still choose authority figures, but I'm going to choose it based on what I reason to be the most reasonable choice. So the example I gave in the last video is if you're looking for medical advice, you find a lump in your head, you're maybe going to go speak to a doctor rather than your pastor. Someone in conventional stage might actually look to deal with certain things through their pastor. Maybe they have a mental health issue. They're going to go to their pastor for help rather than a mental health professional. If they're sick, they might go to their pastor first for prayer and support and whatever that might be before they go, maybe I should go see a doctor about that lump or about whatever it is, this broken leg. And of course, it becomes, the more pressure on this, the more people tend to shift away from their absolute authoritarianism, right? You can break the leg of some of the most conventional Christians and they'll quickly call an ambulance to go to the hospital. They tend not to call the pastor for a prayer. But these are just general broad strokes, but generally speaking, as you shift out of conventional Christianity, you're going to look to authority figures much less, and you're going to look within and go, I can figure out who's a helpful input in my life. Oh, I'll listen to that person because they have education in this area, and it values this rational way of doing things, this logical way of doing things, but its rational and logic is derived from an individual pursuit of truth, not from a given truth from an authority on high. And so conventional Christians typically will look to God, the Bible, Jesus, the pastor, as the giver of truth. And that's then where they reason. That's how they then use logic and ration based on these things. You'll see this when you do apologetics, right? And you'll see someone at conventional stage and someone at a post-conventional stage, this rational, modern stage, whatever you might call it. They have these arguments, but their basic for logic is completely different. right? One's using the Bible and the other one's using maybe like science and geography and geology. All sorts of different things are coming into play where they're looking at the age of the earth and dinosaur bones and things like that. And the other person's going, but I can't look at that stuff first. I have to look at the Bible first and then look at that stuff. And so they just have a totally different way of rationalizing things. So both are logical, both are rational. Don't let the label of the second one, rational, fool you. Both are rational, but they use a very different grounding. Now, why have I said all this? It's so important because this is what's going to happen as you start talking to loved ones. You need to recognize they are at a different stage of psychological development. It's not a bad stage. You're not at the right stage and they're at the wrong stage, or you're not at the good stage and they're at the bad stage. Vice versa, they're not at a good stage and you're at a bad stage. Everyone is at the stage they need to be as they grow and develop on their journey. Like we talked in the last video, you wouldn't say a toddler is at a bad stage because they don't understand high school maths. No, they're at the stage they need to be, and they'll maybe start learning to count to 5 because that's part of getting to become a high school student, right? It's just part of the growth, part of the development, and there's no wrong in that. It's just right for where they are. If you were in high school and you were learning to count to 5, there might have been some hiccups along the way, right? Some problems might be there, and we could maybe look at it and go, oh, that's odd. But generally speaking, people being at a conventional stage is not wrong. It's where they need to be to grow and develop and learn. We needed to go through that stage to get to where we are today, and we wouldn't be where we are today without going through that stage. And so sharing this model of developmental theory is not for you to look at people and look down on them, to say, oh, they're wrong, I'm right, anything like that. It's just to help you understand how they think and how you think. And so going into these conversations, you need to remember the number one thing my loved one is driven by in day-to-day life, and I used to be like this as well, is safety, certainty, and security. And they're looking for it from an authority figure. And so when I go and sit down with my mother and tell her, hey, I'm deconstructing, I am starting to let go of some of my beliefs, I am not so sure I believe X, Y, or Z, what is that doing to your mother and how safe she feels? What is it doing to her sense of certainty? What is it doing to her sense of security? It's whittling away at those hard, right? It's poking them hard, and it's uncomfortable. It's scary, right? So I no longer feel safe. I now feel unsafe. I no longer feel certain. You're causing me to feel a little uncertain about these things. When you tell me that you're questioning the existence of hell and heaven, I am not feeling certain about, like, I'm scared, or I'm feeling certain and I feel I need to defend this and attack your attack on me, which is how it's perceived. And I'm certainly not feeling secure. You're making me feel very insecure right now. I like everyone to be on the same page and for us all to agree that this book over here, that's 2,000 years old, 3,500 years old, we look at that and we agree, yeah, that says this, and we totally are on the same page on this, right? I don't want to look at the fact that there's 40,000 denominations just within Protestantism, all believing slightly different things. I don't want to look at the fact that there's Orthodoxes and Catholics and Coptics and Christians that believe different things. No, I don't want to look at, I want to think we all believe the same thing. I'm looking to my authority figure, head of his denomination, pastor, whoever it is. They tell me this is what the truth is. I believe that. You are throwing a spanner in my works, and it's making me feel unsafe, uncertain, and insecure. Okay? So I say that because and we know this is why we're nervous about talking to loved ones. Because what do you act like when you feel unsafe? What do you act like when you start to feel uncertain? What do you act like when you feel insecure? A lot of stuff comes up, right? The ego starts to backlash, right? You start to push back, you start to get aggressive, you start to attack, you start to argue, all sorts. You get emotional. These are all very natural responses to feeling scared, right? To feeling unsure and uncertain and unsafe. And so we know this is going to happen when we tell our mum, or when we talk to a pastor, or we tell our best friend that we are no longer believing the things that they are believing. It's really hard. There's a lot of components to this. It's really tough, and it's really unfair as well, because here's the deal. You are the only person in that relationship that is going to be able to take the high road. And this feels really unfair as well, because as we grow and develop, we look back on this journey and we realize how much harm has been caused, how much trauma has been involved, how much problematic teaching and all sorts of stuff has been involved in this season of conventional Christianity and in these relationships as well. And it might feel, it's asking a lot for me, the person that was deeply hurt and harmed by this and is trying to figure it out and grow, to take the high road here. And frankly, you don't have to take the high road. You don't have to think of the other person's feelings and tiptoe around them. You don't have to at all. But I can guarantee if you don't, the relationships will, generally speaking, completely collapse. 9 times out of 10, they will fall apart immediately if you just steamroll in there. And so I know the reason I'm saying this is because I know 99% of the people I talk to do not want to destroy the relationships they have. Maybe with certain fringe acquaintances and stuff, you don't really care. I mean, you're not going to still connect with those people going forward. But with, my sister, with my best friend, I'd really like to try and maintain some of these relationships, or at least kind of damage control some of it. And so really, it's unfair, but the onus is on you to take the high road here, to understand, gosh, this person is going to be going through a lot of fear when I tell them this. They're not going to be able to understand even why they're so scared, why they're uncertain, why they're insecure. They're not going to even understand why they're pushing back so hard on what I say. Because their way of framing the world is through this Bible, through a pastor, through this absolute authority that gives them safety, certainty, and security. It's on you to start to go, okay, so how do I communicate with them knowing that? They're not going to go, oh gosh, yeah, Phil, he's now approaching the world through a more rational, individualistic, modern perspective that shifts the way he sees things. He's not going to hold the Bible as an authority, and I should really recognize that and respect that as I talk with him. He's probably going to be a bit triggered by the word Jesus and God maybe, and so I'll try and avoid those words when I have that. That is not going to happen, right? Can you imagine your grandma having that thought process? No, it's not going to happen. They are not in a place to think like that. In the same way that if you are the high school student talking to a young kid, 5-year-old, about maths, you are not going to expect them to understand algebra and talk with you about maths on that level. You're going to have to go, okay, they're at a prior stage, they're at a different way of seeing things. I'm going to have to try and remember what it was like to be like them and meet them where they're at and engage with them where they're at. And actually, that's probably the main way that they grow up. Not that we're trying to change anyone, because that's actually impossible, but it's recognizing certainly coming in with a sledgehammer is not going to help them grow up. Okay, so it's unfair. It really is. And you don't have to tiptoe around your family members. You don't have to baby them. You don't have to do these things. But if you want to have a relationship with them moving forward, you're probably going to have to on some level. You're going to have to come to a place to be able to do that. And so for some people, they wait to tell family members and friends to get to the point internally where they can kind of start to have and extend a bit more grace and compassion to their family members, going, gosh, they're in a system that I once was trapped as well. This system that I hate is actually the system that is oppressing them. It didn't just oppress me, it is currently oppressing them, and they can't see it, and I can't pull them out of it. I'm not going to be able to just rationally, intellectually pull them out of this. That's something they're going to have to grow out of if they can in their time. I might be able to be a part of that as I talk with them, as I engage with them, as I love them, but I'm not going to be able to drag them out overnight. And so I have to extend some compassion and grace and figure out what is going to be a helpful and healthy way of communicating with them where they're at right now. One of the main ways I have found to be really helpful is being really careful with terms and trying to inject safety signals, certainty signals, security signals for them. And so terms are a really big one, right? So as you start to deconstruct, some people I mentioned earlier might hate like using words like Christian, God. These words might be really triggering. Even if you have a concept of the divine, you might want to just put God to the side and maybe use the words divine, ground of being, the universe, whatever it might be. Different people are in different places with that. Some people are happy with using the word God. But I use it as an example of if you're not comfortable using the word God and you're trying to tell your grandma about your deconstruction journey, use the word God. If you're not comfortable talking about your journey on a Christian plane, and you've moved away from that, but you're talking to your parents about it and they're extremely conventionally Christian, maybe using some Christian language is going to be really helpful for them. It's going to help them feel safer. It's going to help them feel more certain. It's going to give them language that helps them feel more secure. It's going to tie them back to that authority that they know, the Bible, their pastor, the Pope, the God, whatever it is, right? You're trying to do things in any way, shape, or form to limit how much you make them feel less unsafe, more unsafe, more uncertain, more insecure. So just by using the right language for them, okay, we know, like, that's not what I mean, but it's fine. I'll use your language because it helps you feel a little less uncertain. It helps you feel a little less unsafe. Okay, so if you can inject some safety, if you can inject some certainty, things like other things that you can do, a great one is ask them to pray for you right now. So hear me out, right? You're going to set a boundary and say, hey, after you maybe have a conversation with them, you're going to say, hey, here's the deal. I would love, not right now, I don't want you to pray for me right now, and I don't want you to be praying with me or around me right now, or whatever boundary you need to set. But what I'd love for you to do is to keep me in your prayers. And as, you think of me during the day, I'd really appreciate you to pray for me to, find the truth, to figure out where my spirituality is. Pray for me that God would show me what's true. Pray for me that I would know Jesus. Whatever, whether you care about that stuff or not, whether you think that's important, whether you think that's going to happen or not, put that to the side. Like, at the end of the day, if they're praying to a supernatural being and it's going to divinely show itself to you, that'd be a bonus anyway, right? But whether you believe it's going to happen or not, what that does is it puts control back in their hands. They can't control you in a conversation, and they can't control you on your journey of spirituality. But on some level, being so certainty, safety, and security driven and looking to authority figures to tell us this black and white way of life, they need to feel in control a little bit. You telling them that you're moving away from that, it creates huge uncertainty, and they feel radically out of control and scared. What you're doing is you're going, hey, here's a way to feel in control again. Talk to the creator of the universe. Ask him to impact me. Ask, and use him, right? Don't say it or her, gosh, So again, trigger points. Ask God to be working in my life. Ask God to reveal himself. What it does is they suddenly go, I feel a bit better. I feel a bit more in control. That makes me feel a bit more safe. It makes me feel a little less worried about this situation. It's an ice cream cone, right? It costs almost nothing. You give it to them, they feel a bit better. It costs you nothing, really. And maybe it's a bit triggering to talk about it. Maybe you're not massively happy. But you've set boundaries. You're saying, hey, I don't want you to be praying for me like over when you say grace at lunch. I don't want you to be like, oh God, and please lead Phil back into the truth. I'm not, I'm setting boundaries. No, we're not doing this. But I do want you to be praying for me. And that can be huge. That can be such a big deal for them. And so giving them little signals like that to say, hey, here's some safety. Because what you're doing in telling them your story is you're making them feel less safe, less certain, less secure. You're basically saying, I doubt what you hold to be absolutely true. That is a scary concept. And here's the deal. They are terrified by that prospect. They need a black and white world. Introducing grey ruins everything. It ruins absolutely everything. Where does heaven and hell fit if everything becomes grey? I want a nice black and white divide so I know I'm on the right side so that I go to heaven. I don't want any grey. What does grey mean? Do I go to heaven now? Am I still in heaven, or am I going to go to hell? What's going on here? And we don't like anything to become too grey at that stage, that conventional stage. And what you're doing is you're making things grey. So what you need to be thinking in the back of your head is going, how can I help them feel a bit more safe, certain, and secure? How can I give them a bit more certainty, black and whiteness, a bit more to feed that fundamentalism? It feels counterintuitive to feed someone's fundamentalism. But if you think about your deconstruction, you'll probably find it's only because you were feeding your fundamentalism, you were seeking that truth and that absolute truth with such fever and passion that it caused you to deconstruct. The vast amount of people that deconstruct is because they're seeking truth. They're looking for that absolute truth. They're trying to figure out this black and white way of doing life, and they're bouncing between ideas, trying to figure out which one is the right idea. And eventually they realize, gosh, this isn't maybe the way to do it. So actually by feeding fundamentalism, you might even be helping them grow as well. I would encourage you to not debate theology. A big thing, so this is something to watch for you. So a shadow side of, and maybe an unhealthy side of the post-conventional, modern, individual, rational stage is you think, well, if I just rationally tell you what makes sense, you'll go, oh, yeah, obviously, great point. And you'll believe what I say. Because I just rationally read the Bible and then I believed something different. So if I can just look at this Bible verse with you and explain it, or if I can just tell you that the church had multiple views on on the atonement or on hell, well, then you'll change. That's a really dangerous game to play because, as I said at the beginning, both groups are rational. They're just playing from a completely different playbook on what rationality is. And so if you get drawn into theological debate, you're going to lose 100% of the time. You might make the best argument. You might win in your head, but you are going to lose because they are not going to accept anything you have to say if you're not using the same authority figures and objects, that the Bible, like my pastor or whatever, if you don't interpret that Bible the same way as my pastor, it doesn't matter how you use the Bible to explain your point. It's wrong. If you come to a conclusion based on something outside the Bible, maybe science or something, it's wrong. The Bible says. So you're not going to go very well having a theological debate. What's interesting as well is you'll probably have certain family members that will want to do this with you. So again, just because they're not at this quote unquote rational stage, they're going to be very rational and think very rationally and go, hey, well, let's talk about this. I can explain to you the things you just didn't understand about Christianity, and maybe you'll come back. Or I can explain to you why the earth is 6,000 years old, and we can rationally look at this from the Bible, and then you'll come back and you'll accept, oh, you were wrong. That's not going to happen, right? You look at that and go, well, obviously that's not going to happen. I'm not going to reread Genesis 1 and go, oh my gosh, you're right, it's 6 days old. It was created in 6 days. Like, that's not going to happen for you. And in the same way, it's not going to happen for them. Okay, so theological debate is probably on some level going to be something that you want to do on both sides. You're going to want to have an intellectual argument about why you believe what you believe now, and they're going to want to have an intellectual argument about why you shouldn't believe what you believe right now, and why what they believe is right. Don't do it. Do not go there. Do not enter into it. It always increases the uncertainty, unsafety, and insecurity in the other person. It's only going to trigger the hell out of you. You're going to end up feeling like utter shit after this conversation, having this, because it's going to be so draining and tiring making these points that people can't comprehend, can't understand, can't see from where you're coming from. You're gonna really damage the relationship. The relationship is going to be hurt having these kind of screaming matches. That's not to say if you have had these conversations, you can't heal that. Of course you can. All relationships have the possibility of restoration and work potentially there if both parties are willing to grow and work on it. But generally speaking, avoid this like the plague, okay? What I would do, something I found very helpful in helping people go through this process with family members and pastors and friends or whatever, is when people say, well, what about, and they'll bring up, what about hell? How can you be so certain that you're right and you're not going to go to hell? The way to approach that answer is not to then go on a theological debate and explain to them how hell works or how you see hell now, or that you don't see there being a God, so you don't care about hell. That stuff is not going to work. What you do is you say, hey, that is a great question. Okay, so you're feeding them. They're making them feel a bit safer, a bit more certain, a bit more safe, secure. So you say, that's a great question. I had those questions too. And yeah, that was a big issue for me. I really worried about that. I can tell you some of the books I read, and I can give you a couple of links to some podcasts or YouTube videos that were really helpful for me, because for me, it took a lot of study and a lot of thought and consideration and prayer and reading my Bible to come to a place where I am now. I don't want to do a debate right now while I'm trying to just tell you my journey and help you understand where I'm at. This is about you understanding what's going on in me. It's not about us having an intellectual argument right now. So what I'll do is I'll send you some links and you can buy the book or check out that YouTube link if you want. You know what's going to happen? 99.99999% of the time, they will never buy that book or look at that YouTube link or read that article or listen to that podcast, because they didn't want to know what your point was. They wanted to tell you their point and prove to you you're wrong and get you to come back. So it just highlights how much that's not going to work. But when people push and they go, no, I want to talk about this, you go, no, I would happily talk with you about this in the future once you've looked at some of those resources, but I don't want to do that work right now. I'm going through my own stuff. I just want to talk about where I'm at and our relationship and what our relationship is going to look like moving forward. That's what's important to me. I'm not here to debate intellectually. I've done the intellectual work over the last X amount of months, years, whatever it might be, decades for some people before they talk to their family. I've done that work. I'm not interested in what you have to say. In fact, to be honest with you, I know what you have to say. I used to believe what you used to say, right? You're not going to argue me into this. So let's not go there just now. Like I said, I'll give you these resources. But for now, let's put that to the side and let's keep talking about my journey, where that leaves you and I, and how we want to move forward with that. Okay, so do not debate those theologies. Generally speaking, you might want to take things quite slow as you come out. Okay, so there's the rip the Band-Aid method off, and you sit down in front of family and go, hey everyone, I don't believe in God anymore, I'm an atheist, and whatever. And obviously lots of people at Deconstruct don't end up atheists. I'm giving an extreme example that would be very shocking to a Christian family. Out of nowhere, just hitting them with that tends to not go well. Okay, it can do, but it tends not to. one of the things I've found that helps, and it might feel a bit disingenuous, but honestly it's one of the best ways to love someone, is to slowly introduce, bit by bit, piecemeal by piecemeal, information to them. And so it might be that you sit down and go, hey guys, I'm just going to take some time off church right now. I'm going through a lot. I found church to be really just triggering a lot of stuff in me. It's really challenging to me right now. I still am hanging out with my Christian friends. I'm still reading the Bible. I'm still studying. I'm still praying. Almost present to them your timeline, but maybe delayed. So maybe you look back and go, gosh, when did I first start questioning? When did I first start coming out? What did that look like for me? Maybe I'm going to tell them that's where I'm at. And this feels really disingenuous, like I said. But honestly, it might be really helpful to just give them a piecemeal over a few months. And this depends again on where you're at with your family. Do you live with your family? Are you miles and miles away from your family? Do you see them once a year? Do you see them more often? How often do you even talk to your parents? Whatever it might look like with friends, the same sort of deal. Like, what is this going to look like? But oftentimes you'll find it's easier and better for everyone if you tiptoe through this. So the example I give, don't necessarily do that. You can figure out what it looks like and what might be a helpful kind of pattern of slowly kind of taking the layers off. But simple things like, hey, I'm going to take some time off church. Christians are much less scared, they still don't like that at all, but they're much less scared of someone taking some time off church than someone saying, God is a fraud and I hate it all. That's probably more palatable. They can come to terms with, oh yeah, Phil doesn't do church anymore. He's a bit weird, but I trust that he's got some sort of spiritual faith and relationship with God, and he's doing his thing, and I kind of trust him, so it'll be okay. That's something I could talk myself into. And then when I come back and go, hey, yeah, no, I've been thinking of a few things slightly differently, and I actually do affirm the LGBTQ community, maybe a really big one again with conventional Christians, but just bit by bit letting things sift in, slowly sink in through the family. Sink in is the word I was looking for, not sift, but sinking in, and so that they can take things on bit by bit and come to terms with some of this stuff, because it's a lot to come to terms with. I mean, talking about this, like what you're effectively saying to your loved one, to your friend, to your family member, whatever it is, to your pastor is, hey, I'm going to spend eternity in hell. When I die, you will never see me again, and I will burn forever and ever and ever while you hang out in heaven playing the harp on your clouds, counting your treasures that you stored up. That's effectively what you're saying. You're hitting them with some really hard truth. Now, of course, you don't believe in that maybe, and you don't have that kind of way of seeing things, but that is how they see things. You are genuinely worried and scared and upset, and maybe you can think back to when you were quite a passionate conventional Christian, and maybe you can think back to hearing about a cousin who gave up on God, or a person in your church who left, and you probably genuinely were really worried for them. You genuinely were like, gosh, no, that's terrible. And you prayed for them and you thought about them. How much more so would you have felt if it was your dad, if it was your brother that walked away from God? You would be obsessed. I remember when I was at Bible school, I remember one of my close friends, his uncle decided he didn't identify as Christian anymore. And in my close friends, he got like 5 of his friends, and we were like fasting every day, and we were praying for his uncle. I mean, we were really worried about this guy. And so, you've got to try and get back into that mindset and remember, this is what you're giving this loved one. You're telling them, hey, this person that you love, your son, your brother, your sister, whoever it might be, that person that you love so much has just told you that they don't want to spend eternity in heaven with you, that they think you're wrong and reject your truth, that they reject what you think life is all about. Above everything, it's about knowing God. They reject that. And now they're never going to see you again. Like, they are going to eternally be distanced from you, and they are going to suffer for eternity. That's a lot of stuff to take on, right? If you were told your kid is going to be punished and suffered and tortured for eternity, you would be fucked up, right? You would be really upset. You'd be really worried. You'd be really scared. Do anything you could to change that. That's the stuff that's rolling around in the head of your loved one as you tell them. You might not be thinking of this. You might even be far enough removed that you can't really even get in the mindset of that. You're like, what was that even like again? You kind of almost look at it as a kind of funny season, like, oh yeah, that was kind of weird. I don't even know what I was thinking. But that is what you were thinking. And so you have to try as best you can to get into that mind and go, gosh, that's a hard thing to process. I'm about to tell my brother or my mother that their daughter, that their son, that their brother is going to spend eternity in hell. That's going to be some heavy shit for them to process, right? And so you've got to be aware of this dynamic as you're coming out to them. And that's why it might be quite helpful for you to do this bit by bit, a little bit slower, a little bit, give them some time to come to terms with some of these points and some of your journey. Because the point is that you probably went on this journey, you probably didn't have an overnight change. You probably changed over weeks, months, even years. Some people continue to deconstruct and whittle away at different truths. And so for you, this was a very gradual process, and it was hard, right? But you did it over a very long period of time, bit by bit, as you could cope. For them, they're getting that whole story, maybe 5 years story, in one day. That's a lot to process, especially as you aren't able to go on that journey yourself. It's a lot to process. So I think have some compassion. Recognize that as you are grieving and you have lost maybe the relationship with God you had, maybe some of the relationships you have with your friends, with your family, maybe you've lost some of your own identity and who you are and your purpose. I mean, there's so many losses that you go through in deconstruction, and you have to grieve those losses. Your loved ones are going to have to grieve the loss of you on some level. And that is going to be really hard for them. It's really, really tough for them to come to terms with that and process that. You're going to want to set, as you go into this, you're going to want to think strongly about what boundaries am I going to want to set with these people, with the family, friends, church members, whoever it is. You're going to want to set some healthy boundaries and say, look, this is where I'm going to draw lines. I don't want you to be laying hands on me and praying for me every time we hang out. I don't want you to be talking about theology around me. I don't want you to be asking me to come to church. It might be different for everyone, of course. But you're going to have to think about, what in this relationship is going to be likely to happen. How do I then communicate that that's not going to happen anymore? It's not going to be an option. And the thing with boundaries is you need to enforce them. If you don't enforce them, they're not a boundary, right? It's like a sign saying keep off the grass. It doesn't stop people getting on the grass. You're going to need to build a fence. Right? And even then, you might have to build a pretty good fence to thing. And then you're going to into consequences, right? Because some people will still climb over the fence and get on your grass, right? And so you need to lay out boundaries and consequences for going over those boundaries. And so it might be, hey, when I hang out, I still want to come around and spend Sunday lunch with the family and hang out and do all that. But one of the boundaries is I don't want you guys asking me about my spirituality, asking me about my faith. I don't want you praying for me. I don't want you asking me to come to church. If you do that, I'm probably not going to be able to keep coming for Sunday. I'd really love to come for Sunday. I really value this relationship. You are the most important people in my life. You're my close family. I love you. But I cannot be around you if you are going to break those boundaries. And then you give your family those options. If they start breaking them, you go, okay, I'm really sorry you broke that boundary. Here's the thing about boundaries. Boundaries are often used as a form of punishment. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, that's really unhealthy boundary teaching. You're not doing this to punish them. You're doing it to protect yourself and protect that relationship. And so when a boundary is broken and you put out a consequence, it's not to punish them. You say, hey, you keep asking me how my faith is doing, and that's really not okay for me right now. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to come over anymore. When you are ready to have relationship without asking me how my faith is, I will be back immediately. So you put a gate in that fence and you say, here's the rules. At any point, you can open that gate and I'll come back over and hang out. But if you break that, I'm going to go through the gate, I'm going to close the gate, and it's getting locked until you are ready to change to fit where I'm at and my boundaries, okay? So with boundaries teaching, it's really important that we don't punish, we set consequences, we hold people to the consequences, and then we create a gate. We create an opportunity for them to realize, oh, at any point I can come back and restore this relationship to that point if I respect that boundary, okay? So it's really important you figure out what boundaries are you going to hold your family to? What boundaries are you going to hold your friends at church to, or whoever it is? Okay, I'm trying to think. There's a couple more things that I want to touch on. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty good, actually, to be honest with you. Just remember, as you go through this process, keep saying to yourself, safety, certainty, security. Have it become a mantra. Before you think about going into these conversations, just be saying it to yourself constantly. Whenever you think of your family member, whenever you think of your mom, your grandma, your father, your brother, whenever you think of your pastor or your friends at church, be thinking they are looking for safety, certainty, and security, and they find it in an authority figure. How am I going to help them feel more safe, secure, certain? So when you're playing those conversations in your head before you have them, which often is not very helpful, but maybe it will be thinking, ooh, if they say that, how do I help them feel a bit more safe? when I tell them this, gosh, how is that going to... Ask yourself, when you think about what you're telling them, how is it going to make them feel unsafe, uncertain, and insecure? What will that do? And then go, how can I say it slightly differently? What would be some words I could use? What are going to be some language I could imply there? Or what could be something I add onto that to then help negate it and make them feel a bit safer again, to draw them back after they feel that challenge? Because here's the thing, they are going to feel attacked. At the end of the day, they base everything off this way of life. If you can remember to be a Christian, everything is filtered through this, right? Your work, your life, your relationships, sex, everything is filtered through the Bible and how these authority figures tell you the Bible should be interpreted. And that's the way you do life across the board. Everything is filtered through this. That's why when you start to lose that, you have an existential crisis, because you are filtered through this. Just who you are and what you're about and your purpose on earth is filtered through this. And so when you start picking at this and taking it apart, you're pushing them into that existential crisis. You're telling them what they believe is wrong. It's really, really hard for them to deal with that, right? Because you're triggering these safety, certainty, and securities. You're questioning their authority figures. Remember this, when you say, I need you to accept that I no longer believe in God, right? What you're putting on the table there is an impossible situation, okay? Because they filter everything through the belief in God, right? They believe the Bible is the word of God because the Bible says the Bible is the word of God. So the Bible is this absolute authority. They believe there is a God because they had an experience and thought it was God, and therefore it must be God. You know, like this very circular reasoning in a lot of these things. And so what you're saying is, I want you to take those things out of the equation to accept me, because they have to do that on some level. When you're absolutist and fundamentalist, there is no, well, what's true for you might be true for you, and what's true for me might be true for me. That doesn't work at all. It has to be black and white, and I need to be true. And I need to be right because I need to go to heaven. But what you're telling me now means that you're going to go to hell. So now I have a question, now I have an option sitting in front of me, which is love my child, my friend, my family member, and accept them and their journey, or accept my truth, accept God, accept the Bible, accept what my pastor says, accept the way I've built my life for 50, 60 years, accept all the decisions I've made. For me to accept you in your journey causes me to have to question every decision I've ever made. It causes me to question my marriage, my friends, my family, my work choices, maybe my giving up the opportunity to work, maybe spending my entire life dedicated to helping people become Christian. You know, people, what you're doing is you're putting people in these huge existential problems, right? They are going through this massive problem of going, boy, I love my friend or my son unconditionally. I just absolutely love them. But I can't let go of me, of my entire way of being, of knowing God, of being certain of going to heaven. You're saying I have to go to hell too on some level, right? This is all happening subconsciously. At no point are they really thinking this through at all. That's stuff that happens internally and really wrecks us. It's not something that we can overly look at and evaluate. It takes taking a step out of that and being impartial to it and going, oh, this is probably some of the inner turmoils that are going on here. But my point being, this is really hard for your family member. I know it's hard for you. It's really hard for you, and it sucks, and it's totally shit, and I'm so sorry that you're deconstructing. I'm so happy you're deconstructing as well, and I'm sure you go through both of those emotions as well. I'm sure you have a lot of pain and suffering in your deconstruction, but you also have joy and excitement and a new lease of life and zeal for all that can be. So it's a whole range of emotions. But as hard as this is for you to talk to your family members, you're okay. When they talk to you, you aren't okay, and neither are they. Both parties go through a washing machine, right? They just take a beating, you know? They are freaking out because you're going to hell. They are freaking out because what does this mean for my faith and my beliefs and what it looks like? This is a huge deal. I cannot tell you this will go well. I cannot tell you it will go wrong, bad either. For a lot of people, family members surprise us. I've talked to thousands of people, admittedly, but some of them have come back to me and said, hey, Phil, I talked to my parents, and it turns out they were deconstructing, but were worried to tell me because they didn't want to ruin my faith, right? So that could happen. It's not as common as you'd hope, but that could happen, right? You might talk to your friend from church and they go, dude, you too? I've been listening to, this person online, Dirty Rotten Church Kids, and holy crap, yeah, totally, I get it. That might happen. It really might. And if you talk to enough people, it almost certainly will happen because you can't talk to too many people in church without coming across this. But for a lot of people, that's not going to happen. And it's going to be bad. It's going to be really hard. It's going to suck. The question is, how much will it suck? How bad will it go? And what we're doing as we have these conversations is hopefully damage controlling. We're hopefully keeping that relationship held gently. We're looking after that relationship so that hopefully as they come to terms with some of this stuff, as they can process some of this stuff, as they can realize that, gosh, no, I love this person so much and I understand that this is hard for them. I don't understand it, I don't get it, but I love them and I want to keep them in my life. This is what we're trying to facilitate happening. Honestly, 9 times out of 10, the conversation is going to go pretty rough for everyone involved. It's like I've talked about in the last 40 minutes. It's not fun, right? It's not fun to realize all this stuff. It's not fun for you to be dragged back into this conventional Christian world and have to be faced with all the fears and doubts and accusations and everything else. But it's also not fun for them. It's really hard for them to find out that someone they love has rejected God, has turned their back on their way of existing and seeing the world. And gosh, I don't know if I can even, I can kind of remember what that's like on some level, but I don't know if I can. I'm so far removed from it now. That pain must be horrific, especially for someone so close, a very close family member or best friend. That is absolutely devastating. And especially because a lot of our relationships are built around that world, right? A lot of our families, we don't even know how to communicate without bringing up God or Jesus. Some of our friendships, we've only known this person since, being kids in Sunday school together, and all we know is to talk about God together and pray together and go out and evangelize together or whatever it is. That is probably the end of a relationship. So you're in for a treat, right? You're in for a roller coaster ride. I can't tell you it's going to go well. I hope it does. I really do. I genuinely believe a lot of the things I've shared today will help you ensure that it goes better than it would have if you don't apply some of these things. But it's not a black and white formula. It's not as simple as that. You know your loved ones better than I do. Absolutely. So you're going to want to think about what are their unique hang-ups? What is their personality? How can I, ahead of time, think of helpful resources to mention to them? How can I think of helpful responses that aren't going to drag me into arguments? How can I think of specific things that will make them feel safer, more certain, and more secure? You're going to be okay. I really mean it. I've walked through thousands of people, walked them through this process, and many of them have lost family and friends over this. Many of them. And you may lose some of those relationships. You may keep them to a very limited degree, but you may be on the other side looking for some new friends and looking for some new family. That happens as well. And the beautiful thing is, this is not a small community. There are millions upon millions of us. This is actually the fastest growing community in the West, spiritual community. There's more people deconstructing their faith than there are coming to Christianity in the West. In fact, before long, there'll be more people deconstructing their faith than there are in Christianity in the West. And so you are not alone. There are people all around you that have gone through this, that are going through this, that are in your corner, that support you. I'd encourage you to check out the deconstructionnetwork.com. It's a free resource and it helps you find people that are going through this process in your local area. It can be really invaluable, just having someone that gets it. Having friends from maybe outside of your Christian life, maybe in work or school or whatever, that are atheists or agnostic, and that they're supportive and they love you and they accept you for who you are, but they don't really get the hard process you're going through. It can make a big difference having someone that gets it. So do make sure you check out that resource and see if there's anyone in your local area. My Patreon has a private community as well. As 100 or so of us, and we hang out and talk and support each other through these processes, help each other make these decisions and figure out how to have these conversations, and also just chat day in, day out and check in with each other. And we talk about spirituality and atheism and all sorts of different things and explore those ideas as well. So you might want to check that out if you would like, and I would appreciate that. I do everything for free, and so it's only by having patrons that I can pay the bills and survive. I always am here for you. If you don't find anyone in the Deconstruction Network, if you don't have anyone to talk to online, shoot me a DM. I would love to talk with you. I'm on Instagram. It's just Phil Drysdale. Anytime, night or day, shoot me a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I reply to all messages. And I really would love to help you on this journey, whatever that looks like. If you're going through this conversation with your family, if you don't know what to do, feel free to message me. I'd love to talk with you about this and help in any way I can. What you're doing is so brave. Honestly, it is one of the hardest things you can do. This is so tremendously hard. And when they look at the griefs of deconstruction, the grief of the loss of one's self, the loss of one's purpose and drive, the loss of one's community, the loss of one's God even maybe, or the loss of one's relationship with God and that changing and having to come to terms with that, and the loss of one's friends and family, when they look at that across the boards, none of them win out over friends and family. Every time when people ask what was the hardest, it's this. It's talking with friends and family. It's losing friends and family. It's navigating a completely new relationship with these friends and family. And it's even trying to find new friends and family. And so this is hard. Give yourself time. Listen to your body. Don't push yourself more than you need to. Take breaks. Set up hard boundaries if you need to. If people become aggressive or hard to you, cut them off if you need to. That's not okay. And you don't have to take people's abuse. You don't owe them an answer. You don't owe them. They don't need to be convinced that your journey is valid. That is not important. Okay? This is not why we're doing this. We're doing this to be more open and authentic with the people we love. There's something so painful about being around people we love and not being able to show them who we are. And for a lot of people, we do that. You know, maybe some people ask me, is it worth coming out to my grandparents? They're in their 80s and they're probably going to die in the next 5 years. So do I really want to break their hearts? And I'm like, maybe not. Maybe you talk to your family and say, hey, we're not going to tell grandma, grandpa. And you kind of nod and smile when you hang out with them. You know, you don't tell them. You maybe like say, yeah, oh, absolutely. You know, church is great. You know, like you just don't go there. That can happen as well. But generally speaking, for people that you're going to do life with for a long time, it's really hard to live hidden under a mask. I know mask is a problematic metaphor these days. But generally speaking, most of us going into those environments, friends, family, church, we have to put on some mask that pretends to be the perfect conventional Christian. And everyone accepts that and they love it. But the problem is when you get home or you get in the car at the church car park, you take that mask off and you become your authentic self that's doubting, that's questioning, that's not sure where they're at, or that's atheist or agnostic or become Buddhist. You take that mask off. The mask is glowing with love and acceptance, but you feel empty and hollow and not seen and not loved. That's hard. And so I think for most people in time, it becomes quite important to take the mask off and just be open and say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is who I am now. This is how I'm living life. This is how I'm processing things. This is how I'm seeing things. I'd really love if you came with me. Not saying you have to change your beliefs. I think it's something I maybe didn't mention there, but it's really important that to give them safety, certainty, and security. As you mentioned to your family members, I'm not telling you to change your beliefs. I don't want you to change your beliefs. I don't need you to change your beliefs. You might want them to change their beliefs. Maybe you see it as harmful and whatever, but trying to get them to change their beliefs is not going to change that. So don't just give them another safety signal and say, look, you don't need to change your beliefs. This is about me and my change of beliefs. I just want you to know that's where I'm at. I would love for you to still love me and accept me and be in relationship with me. But if that's too hard for you as well, I understand. We'll set up a boundary. There's a gate there. If you ever feel like you can accept me for where I'm at, please come through. I would love to have a relationship with you. But yeah, you're doing an amazing job. You are doing really hard work and you should be really proud of yourself because this is one of the hardest things you can do. This is a full-blown existential crisis. It's losing so much of who you are, your relationships, your purpose, your identity, your certainty and safety and security are up in the air. You're losing so much and you're so brave for facing that head on and moving forwards bit by bit. But listen to yourself, listen to your body, know when you need breaks, know to take those breaks and don't feel guilty for resting. It's important to rest. You're only going to be able to do this if you take it at the right pace and only you know what the right pace is. All right, I'm done talking. We'll be back in another video at some point in this series. But I hope that helps you as you think about how you're going to talk to other people in your family, how you're going to approach this topic as you talk with friends, family, pastors, church members, whatever it is. I really wish you all the best, and I'd love to hear how it's going. I'd love to support you in any way. So again, shoot me a message on Instagram, check out the Deconstruction Network, consider becoming a patron and joining our online community as well. You can do that at patreon.com/Phil Drysdale or phildrysdale.com/partner. I'd love to see you in that group as well. It'd be really fun. But yeah, I'll catch you later. Love every one of you. I really hope you're doing well. I hope this goes well for you. Peace. If you are deconstructing, there is no reason to do this alone. It can be an incredibly lonely process, but the deconstructionnetwork.com is a free resource to help you find others deconstructing in your local area. If you would like to support what I do, everything I do is for free, from talking to people for hours on end to producing resources and podcasts. It is only possible because people give generously. There's never any need to give. It will always be free, everything I do. But if you do, we do have an amazing private community group that we talk on over on Discord that you would gain access to. And we do regular audio and video chats on there as well. So it'd be great to see you in there. But of course, never any requirement. And of course, please, please, please come and talk to me on Instagram. I love connecting with people. I love helping people on their journey. If you need a safe space to process your deconstruction, I would love to connect. It's just at Phil Drysdale. Love every one of you. Peace.